What is up, people? This is your second video back-to-back I'm making. This is your Psychology 2, Unit 2 Developmental Psychology review. First off, make sure you get all your stuff in a row and have your packet organized and make sure that you know and can find everything on Teams or in the general channel in the Unit 2 files. All the slideshows, all the handouts are there. This was the pink packet, and it was all pink! Anyway, here are the big terms that you need to know. One thing that happened, though, I will just briefly touch on is these last three terms we didn't get to, and I'm not going to test you on something I didn't teach you, but for the sake of time and moving on, we're going to cut those ones out. So we didn't talk about these related to adulthood. So that's the laundry list of terms that you should know and understand and be able to use. So keep that in mind. 4 stages and what separates them. So Piaget's cognitive stages were was the first theory that we talked about. So we've got sensory motor is the first one. We've got, and that is usually, the first 2 years of life. Then you get into your pre-operational, where you become very egotistical. And then you get into concrete operational about the time that you're 7 or so. And then when you're about 12, start going through puberty, get into adolescence, you go into your formal operational, which is generally what they say is the last stage that you enter. What are some signs or characteristics? So a couple things. In sensory motor, you start to think about object permanence is a big one. So object permanence, separations. We've got object permanence is one of the first ones. Language development is an important one that separates one from another. So when you're pre-operational and you're concrete operational, your language is getting much, much more complex. Egoism or like your inability to take on perspectives of others. So that's a kind of social emotional way of looking at things. So thinking about, can they understand what other people think about things? And that generally doesn't start happening until you get to that concrete operational stage. It's why they do the false belief task. Although recent research has demonstrated that some kids as young as 4 or 5 can demonstrate the false belief task. You also want to think about moral or abstract reasoning starts to develop in your formal operation. I mean, you can do some moral reasoning when you're younger, but really getting into the abstract empathy kind of standpoint when you're getting into your formal operational stage. I would say inductive reasoning tends to develop first, making broad arguments from specific examples, and then deductive reasoning. So that's going to be kind of in your concrete operational stage. And then your deductive reasoning, which is categorical, applying specific rules in a situation, is going to happen more when you're in your formal operational stage. Because then you can start to think about, even if the rule doesn't make sense, you still can apply the rule. So anyway, that's how that works. These are some things that separate them broadly. 8 stages of Erickson. I'm not going to ask you to recite them to me, but the first thing you develop is trust versus mistrust. Okay, so that's going to be like stranger danger, going through like stranger danger, trust, mistrust. Then you get to autonomy. Autonomy versus shame. So this is where you go into your terrible twos and you start wanting to do things your own way and not really understanding that other people have other perspectives. People get upset with you, things like that. Eventually, as you get beyond that, it's a kind of like autonomy versus shame, but it's more of taking specific initiatives to do things. And also situations. Initiative. A good place to look for this are some of the videos that we did that virtual field study on. You can see a lot of these examples in those. And a lot of you said that if you turn that in. So initiative versus guilt. So this is more like trying to do things versus feeling bad about doing the wrong thing or being, hi, Emily. Emily Wing is here. Reprimanded. As you get into your elementary and sort of into middle school, you get industry versus inferiority. One example would be like developing a childhood sports, things like that, and feeling like self-conscious about what's going on there. That's 4. 2 through 4. You've got identity versus role confusion as you get out of that, and that's where you start going through like, what are you going to do what are you going to do? Like, who are you? What's your purpose? What's your role within your family, with your friend group, social context, things like that. As you get into your younger adult years, intimacy versus isolation is going to be an important one, like developing more intimate relationships, especially finding like a spouse or a life partner versus like not having those intimate relationships. As you get in your midlife crisis, you got your generativity versus stagnation. So this is where you start thinking about, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? What is my purpose overall? We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I always forget the last one. That's not good, Mr. Carly. The very last one of Erickson's stages. I know it's like when you look back on your life and you decide what it all means and things like that. Dang it. That's terrible that on camera I have forgotten. But everybody's fallible, I suppose, as you would say in theory of knowledge. Integrity versus despair. Integrity versus despair. So makes sense of your life. This is what they call your golden years. You're really looking at what were your contributions. So that's how they all go. I kind of ran through basically what they look like. Continuous versus discontinuous or discontinuous. That sounds stupid. Just basically means, do things happen linearly or in stages? Most developmental psychology tries to put things into stages, but a lot of that doesn't happen that way. You're bouncing back and forth all the time. It doesn't always happen linearly either. It's kind of more of a continuum. But from the theoretical standpoint, we're just looking at is it happening linearly or in stages? Most of these happen in stages. Piaget, Erickson, Kohlberg's theory of moral development, things like that. I feel like this is a pretty easy thing to do from your unit cover sheet in your notes, so that I'm not going to do that right now. One really important thing is to know these get 3 experiments and what their thoughts were on this. So Harlow did the monkey experiment where they looked at the whether or not a monkey gravitated more towards the one that gave it survival, the fake mother that gave it survival milk, or more towards the one that gave it comfort, which was the fabric monkey. Bowlby just looked specifically at what does secure attachment look like, and kind of the idea of a secure base and why that's important. So being able to feel comfortable enough to explore the surrounding area, but then have your parent come back to. And they said the 2 big things for Bowlby were mutually enjoyable activities and caregiver attentive to child's needs. Pretty basic stuff when you think about it, but yeah, it's just overview. And then Ainsworth was the strange situation. So it was basically what does a secure attachment look like when children are presented with a situation that they're not quite comfortable with, versus avoidant attachment versus kind of disorganized attachment. So those are 3 things that we looked at. So those 3 would be good. And that relates to parental attachment is going to impact a child's self-confidence, their ability to explore their surroundings, their willingness to engage with different groups of people. So overall, having a higher, more developed self-concept is related to parental attachment, at least early on in life. 4 parenting styles. Again, these are going to have impact on child's self-concept. They were authoritative, okay, and these are all based off of expectations and warmth is what they call it. So high expectation, high warmth would be authoritative. High expectations, low warmth would be authoritarian. Low expectations, high warmth would be your permissive example, and then neither would be negligent or uninvolved, they would say, and generally possibly abusive in a way. Okay. Again, these affect self-concept. These are going to affect how kids view authority figures, and also how they view their self-efficacy in a situation. Generally, highest self-efficacy, most developed self-concept is going to go to authoritative parents. Authoritarian and permissive don't have terrible outcomes, but they can lead to a lack of understanding of role, or the role in a situation. And then obviously these are going to have very negative impacts. Again, I feel like you can do this on your own from your notes. 3 stages are pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional. The best way to remember these are, conventional, that doesn't fit. Good singing. Okay, anyway. How these develop during adolescence. Okay, so this is early on in your life. This is me first, self-interest, me first, okay? what's going to lead to the best outcomes for me. This is still about you, but it's like, how will others think of me? Okay, and what's right morally by society. And this is like, what is universally or relatively correct is what I would say, is where you start thinking more abstractly about universal human rights and societies and context and roles and things like that. So as you get into adolescence, you start developing from your conventional into your post-conventional stage. So you get to adulthood. And then what stages of psychosocial development are most significant in adolescence? Well, you start off with this kind of industry versus inferiority. That's why your middle school years are so awkward. You're starting to figure out your place. Then you get into your identity versus role confusion stage. And then eventually you're going to get into, as you're ending up with into your young adulthood, thinking about intimacy versus isolation. Now that you're on your own, you're outside of your family dynamic. Typically, I mean, you might have been before, but definitely now, and thinking about developing those intimate relationships. We didn't talk about adulthood, but adulthood would be mostly into that generativity, stagnation, and integrity versus despair. And Ms. Moore is here to talk to me, so I am going to go. So smash that like button, and I will talk to you later.